So you're tired of the default neutral sans serif typefaces on your computing devices, and you want to use a more interesting font in your documents, presentations, and videos. You've come to the right place, because here are my top recommendations. Actually, before I get to that, you should know that I'm assuming you want a font that is 1. Neutralish and doesn't draw attention to itself, so not something too vintage, elegant, or friendly. 2. Not something that's so neutral that you can't tell it apart from Helvetica and Arial. 3. A font that's easy to download, install, and use in Microsoft Office and LibreOffice, or use in the Google Office suite. In other words, I'm not going to recommend fonts and font collections that are targeted at designers. And 4. A font that works well in both text and in headings, because not all fonts do that. If my assumptions are correct, let's start with my 4 free recommendations, using Helvetica as our reference neutral sans serif. If you're not feeling too adventurous, but you still want something slightly more modern, try Inter. If you want something that feels classic but is friendlier, try Public Sans. But if you want a friendlier font that looks more modern, try Officer Sans. And if you want a font with a little more style, try Nebula Sans. Of these, Inter and Public Sans are available on Google Fonts, so you'll be able to use these in the Google Office suite. When it comes to paid fonts, we have a lot more options, but these are the 4 I recommend based on the assumptions I talked about earlier. If you want a font that has more personality than Helvetica, try Aktiv Grotesk. If you want a font that is neutral but slightly friendlier than Helvetica, try Neue Montreal. If you want something friendly and modern, try Phonic. And if you want something that's more stylish, try Brenner Sans. Download links to all these fonts are in the description below. You can stop watching this video now, but if you want to know why I recommend those fonts over all the other ones out there, keep watching. The process I went through to shortlist these fonts had 2 criteria. First, I needed to have tried all the fonts I'm recommending. That meant I could only include fonts that I could get for free, fonts that I purchased outright or purchased a license to, and fonts that I could download trial versions of. And also the trial license let me show those fonts being used in this video. Second, the fonts I picked couldn't deviate too much from the neutral vibe of Arial, Helvetica, and Liberation Sans. What do I mean by neutral vibe? Well, in my head, I think about fonts on a formality scale that goes from friendly to elegant. I'm not going to get into the details of this right now, but here are some well-known typefaces and where they fit on my scale. These categories aren't mutually exclusive, by the way. Some fonts fit in more than one category based on how they're being used at the time. Though if it makes it easier, you can think of these categories as dress codes for fonts, going from casual to black tie. Anyway, Arial, Helvetica, and Liberation Sans are all in the neutral category, and I wanted to expand my selection to include fonts that were either a little more chill or a little more stylish than neutral. I didn't want to go so far to the chill side that fonts like Lato and Open Sans would be included, and I didn't want to go so far to the stylish side that fonts like Poppins or Montserrat would be included. I also didn't want to include fonts that were too neutral, like Nimbus Sans or Untitled Sans. So that's how I shortlisted the 8 fonts I am recommending. And while there are a lot of good, even great fonts I could have included in my list, these are my favorites. So why did I pick these typefaces? Let's go through them one by one, starting with Inter. Inter was designed by Rasmus Andersson when he couldn't find a font better than Roboto to use during the ongoing development of Figma, the interface design app. Inter is in fact based on Roboto, which in turn is partly based on Helvetica. Oh, and if you're an Apple user and Inter looks familiar, that's because it is partly based on typefaces like Apple's San Francisco as well. When you compare Inter, which is on the right, to Helvetica, which is on the left, you can see that Inter has looser tracking, meaning it has more space between letters. Helvetica is quite dense, and that makes text set in small sizes a little difficult to read. Not so with Inter. Inter also has round dots instead of Helvetica's square ones. This makes Inter look friendlier and less formal. From version 4 of this font, Inter also has true italics. Helvetica's italics are just slanted letters, which in typographic terms are called obliques. Inter's italics are letter forms that are redrawn to work better when they're leaning over. These are referred to as true italics. Compared to Helvetica, I think this makes Inter look more modern. Finally, Inter comes in 2 optical sizes. Inter, the one at the bottom of the box, and Inter Display, the one at the top. Interdisplay, like Helvetica, has slightly tighter tracking, which looks better in headings, titles, and other large text settings. Helvetica Neue, the digital font I'm showing here, doesn't have a separate display size. But the original metal type Helvetica did have optical sizing. If you want a version of Helvetica that does have a display size, check out Neue Grotesk from commercial type. Now let's move on to Public Sans. Public Sans was created by the US Web Design Systems team as an open source typeface to be used by the US government. Public Sans is based on Libra Franklin, which is an open source version of Franklin Gothic by Maurice Fuller Benton. When you compare Public Sans, which is on the right, to Helvetica, which is on the left, you can see that Public Sans has looser tracking, so the text takes up more space overall. Public Sans also has unambiguous letterforms, meaning it passes the IL1 test. In many sans serif typefaces, the capital I, lowercase l, and numeral 1 look a lot like each other. Fonts like Public Sans add little feet to letters like the lowercase l, so you can easily tell these three characters apart. The one downside to Public Sans is that, at least for now, it is only available in the Latin script. Helvetica and its many versions are available in lots of scripts, like the Cyrillic you see here. Next up, we have Officer Sans. Officer Sans isn't based on a specific typeface, though it still clearly falls into the Gothic sans serif category. It was, however, designed to be a drop-in replacement to Arial and Helvetica. When you compare Officer Sans, which is on the right, to Helvetica, you can see that Officer Sans is metrically compatible with Arial and Helvetica. So you can replace either of those with Officer Sans without messing up your document or design. Officer Sans has round dots, which makes it more friendly than Helvetica. I also think Officer Sans is more stylish. Helvetica's 1957 looks formal and neutral, while 1957 set in Officer Sans looks more geometric and modern. Helping Officer Sans look more modern is its open letterforms, which are wider open than even Arial. Finally, like Public Sans, Officer Sans also has unambiguous letterforms, which is cool. Officer Sans is free for personal use, but it also has a paid version. The paid version gives you more weights, or if you buy the full collection, a condensed version as well. The last of my free font recommendations is Nebula Sans. This font is a version of Source Sans 3 that's been tweaked to be a drop-in replacement to Whitney. Source Sans 3 is based on Franklin Gothic, or technically News Gothic, which is Franklin Gothic's lighter weight version. As it happens, Whitney is also partly based on News Gothic, so the lineage from Franklin Gothic comes to Nebula Sans from both directions. When you compare Nebula Sans, which is on the right, to Helvetica, you can see that Nebula Sans is larger and has round dots. Nebula Sans also has angled terminals, which you can see when you compare the lowercase t's. And it has open letterforms, which you can see when you compare the lowercase c's. While Nebula Sans doesn't have unambiguous letterforms, it does have less ambiguous letterforms, with the lowercase l being taller than the uppercase I. Though when you italicize Nebula Sans, the lowercase l does get some feet. To recap, Inter, Public Sans, Officer Sans, and Nebula Sans are the 4 free fonts I recommend. Inter and Public Sans are available from Google Fonts, meaning you can either download them or use them in the Google Office suite. Officer Sans and Nebula Sans you have to download from their websites and then install on your computer, but that's super easy to do. Moving on to my paid font recommendations, let's start with Aktiv Grotesk from Dalton Maag. Aktiv Grotesk's designers wanted to create a typeface that was somewhere between Helvetica and Universe, removing some of Helvetica's quirks and adding some of Universe's warmth. When you compare Aktiv Grotesk, which is on the right, to Helvetica, you can see that Aktiv Grotesk is larger. It also feels warmer. Look at Aktiv Grotesk's 1957. This looks friendlier and less designed than Helvetica's. Aktiv Grotesk also feels more modern. The spur on the uppercase G has been smoothed out, for example, and the spur of the lowercase a points downwards, and some of the terminals, like on the uppercase G, are slightly angled. Next up, we have Neue Montreal from Pangram. When you compare Neue Montreal, which is on the right, to Helvetica, you can see that Neue Montreal has tighter tracking. This helps Neue Montreal work better in headings and large text, and it also makes body text set in that typeface look more dense. Neue Montreal's design is almost identical to Helvetica's, but there are enough subtleties that its overall feel is warmer and more friendly. As you can see, the subtle differences in the letter forms are indeed very subtle, with Neue Montreal being a little more open, slightly differently angled, and a touch wider. I almost didn't recommend this typeface, because when you see it out in the world, it can be difficult to distinguish from Helvetica. But almost at a subconscious level, Neue Montreal feels less neutral than Helvetica, which is why it still made the cut. And that's not just because of the round dot on the lowercase I. I also recommend Neue Montreal because it has a really cool monospace version, with many more weights than Helvetica's monospaced, which to be honest, I'm not a big fan of. Now let's move on to Phonic from Schick Toika. When you compare Phonic, which is on the right, to Helvetica, you can see that Phonic is smaller, but with looser tracking, which lets it stay readable at smaller sizes. It also has round dots, which makes it look friendlier. Even though Phonic appears to be as sharp as Helvetica, some of its line intersections have been rounded, making it feel warmer and more friendly. It also feels less blocky and more modern compared to Helvetica, mainly because its round letter forms are more oval than they are round. Phonic also has a monospace version that I quite like. Finally, we come to Brenner Sans from Typotech. When you compare Brenner Sans, which is on the right, to Helvetica, you can see that Brenner Sans has a higher line height and slightly looser tracking, which means the text takes up more space on the page. I also think Brenner Sans has a lot more style when compared to Helvetica. I love Brenner Sans' double-story lowercase g and the joint of the uppercase K, where the leg and the arm meet evenly at the horizontal stroke. Brenner Sans' letter forms also look different to Helvetica's because their designs are based on rounded rectangles instead of ovals. Probably the coolest thing about Brenner Sans, which is why it's so expensive, is that it belongs to the massive Brenner superfamily. You could build almost anything you wanted using just this superfamily, and that is really cool. To recap, Aktiv Grotesk, Neue Montreal, Phonic, and Brenner Sans are the 4 paid typefaces I recommend. Aktiv Grotesk and Neue Montreal are available in a basic family set, meaning just the regular, italic, bold, and bold italic fonts. The desktop license to the smaller set isn't that pricey. Of course, if you want the full set of these typefaces, or the smallest set for Phonic and Brenner Sans, you'll have to pay quite a bit more. If you've only ever used free fonts, then these prices might seem like a lot to you, but let me assure you that these typefaces are very much worth it. Now those were the typefaces I recommend. What do others say? As usual, TypeWolf has some excellent recommendations. Many of these are too similar to Arial and Helvetica for the purposes of this video, but Neue Haas Unica, Aktiv Grotesk, and Acumen fit the bill. The folks from TypeType recommend 3 of their own typefaces, each one slightly different from the next. I don't have any personal experience with these typefaces, but they're worth exploring. The final alternatives list comes from Pangram. These are all cool typefaces, but a bunch of them were too similar to Arial and Helvetica to include in this video. I do, by the way, have 2 quick honourable mentions. First is Roboto. Yes, this is the most popular font on Google Fonts and is used everywhere on the web. But I do have a soft spot for this typeface and I don't see it used much in documents and presentations, so it might be worth a look. Second is Unica 77 from Lineto. Like Aktiv Grotesk, Unica was designed as a hybrid of Universe and Helvetica, taking the best parts from each. That heritage is literally in the Unica name. Unica 77 is an excellent revival of the original Unica, though it is quite expensive. I do have a trial version of this typeface, but the trial license doesn't let me include these fonts in my video. So for the comparison with Helvetica, I'm showing screenshots from the Lineto website of the sample text set in Unica 77. But honourable mentions aside, these 8 typefaces are still my main recommendation. I think you should check them out. Download and purchase links to all the fonts mentioned are in the description below. There's also a link to my blog post in which I've got a transcript, photo credits, and links to additional resources. What are your favorite slightly different alternatives to Arial, Helvetica, and Liberation Sans? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, bye!